සුවඳ තවත් දෙකු කලක් රැඳෙන්න ඩබල් පර්ෆියුම් ලුක් සමගින් එන නව සන්ලයිට් රෝස්.
Tonight, looming disaster. Economists says the government needs to let go of its fuel price control to prevent further financial woes.
When the pandemic is over, there will be huge increase in oil prices. The government cannot subsidize the price using the tax money.
No price too high. As 1,000 metric tons of waste is cleaned up, the Justice Minister says the sky's the limit for claims in express disaster.
$1 billion limit of a claim, and then if it goes beyond that, all the PNIs together have a $7 billion limit.
All options open. The government seeks affirmation for the use of the Pfizer vaccine as the second Covishield dose. Blinded by the virus, experts say COVID-19 may have eased the spotlight away from deadly dengue.
All of our field staff and hospital staff engage with COVID. There are very little time they can spend on dengue control.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Monday, the 14th of June, 2021.
ඒ කියන්නේ ලයිෆ් බෝයි අවස්ථා 10කදී ලෙඩ රෝග 10කට හේතු වන වෛරස් ඇතුළු විෂ බීජවලට එරෙහිව සටන් කරනවා කියලා.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhamma Kekanai. Now, with many sections of society still rueing the recent fuel price hike, there have been calls for its scrapping, most recently from the country's main opposition, who say that the government can continue to subsidise the consumer. However, Professor Sirima Laberatne of the University of Colombo's Department of Economics says that the government's insistence on controlling fuel prices remains the fundamental problem. He added that not allowing the market to determine domestic prices could add more pressure on the government finances, as global crude prices are expected to rise even more as economies recover from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Despite the island-wide travel restrictions, there were signs of panic on Friday night as long queues of cars were seen lining the streets outside filling stations in Colombo as a midnight price hike loomed. With global crude prices hovering at the $70 a barrel level, the writing on the wall was always there for a hike, especially considering the fact that Sri Lanka hasn't had a price review in over a year. And when you add to that a massive $64 million loss in just the first 2 months of this year alone by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, the picture begins to become somewhat clearer. Right now, many believe that the increase of 20 rupees for a litre of 92-octane petrol, 23 rupees for 95-octane petrol, 7 rupees for auto diesel, 12 rupees for super diesel, and 7 rupees for kerosene are a bit too steep for a populace hit hard by a pandemic. This includes the country's opposition, who have called for the government to cancel the price hike. However, the question remains, is it practical for fuel prices to remain at their previous levels?
The oil prices in the world market, it was about $40 a barrel about a year ago, and now it has gone closer to $70 a barrel. So in that scenario, actually, the oil price hike is inevitable. But the problem is, in Sri Lanka, the domestic oil prices should be in the hands of the market and not in the hands of the government, which means now actually the domestic oil prices should vary, should go up and down in line with world market prices, because the government cannot control the cost of production of this particular commodity, and Sri Lanka has no power and authority to do anything related to the world oil prices.
So if Sri Lanka's domestic fuel market determined how much we pay for fuel, what are the factors that would influence the final price?
Well, most of the countries actually, they allow world market prices to be reflected through the domestic prices. adding the taxes, so subsidies and the distribution cost and refinery cost and any other administrative cost. All these adjustments can be done to the world market price, and then that will be the domestic price.
In contrast, however, Professor AdaDerana says that the Sri Lankan government method is somewhat of a double-edged sword. While on one side there is a consumer to keep happy with low prices, the cost of maintaining that poses a much bigger issue than the country can afford.
When the prices are high, the government has to use taxpayers' money to subsidize it to the consumers. Whereas the price is low, the government can actually make the profit, but it is also not in line with the world market prices. So the best thing to do is to take the hands away from this controlling the fuel prices.
In addition, with global prices looking increasingly likely to continue to rise in the upcoming months, is the government staring down a barrel at even more financial risk?
Particularly when the COVID pandemic is over and there are signs that it is coming to an end in another year or two. But by that time, the world economy is going to recover and there will be huge increase in world market oil prices unless there are some other events happening around us. In that situation, what are we going to do? The government cannot subsidize the price using the tax money.
With that in mind, Professor AdaDerana says that Sri Lanka could do well to face facts and follow suit with what its regional neighbours are doing, such as introduce a fuel pricing formula.
Now, if you look around, in most of the countries around in our neighbourhood, their oil prices are much higher than ours. They are actually having this fuel formula to determine the local oil prices. And in some countries, that oil prices keep changing daily. In some countries like India, it is weekly. So it is better to have a method like that to keep the domestic prices in line with the world market prices. That is the best thing to do.
කාලගුණය කොහොමුණත් රයිනෝ නං වහලට සේෆ් තමයි මුළු ගෙදරම.
Now, the country's true dengue situation cannot be assessed through the current cases available. These were the remarks of Director of the National Dengue Control Unit, Dr. Aruna Jayasekara, who said that even though Sri Lanka's numbers show a remarkable decline compared to the past years, this isn't the ground situation.
Since the first recorded case of COVID-19 in Wuhan, the residual effects of the virus has steamrolled communities, livelihoods and economies. It has seized attention away from existing concerns, fixating the attention at each level firmly on how to defeat it. Remarkably, vaccines against the virus were manufactured by pharmaceutical companies against COVID-19 in record time. That diligence, however, wasn't seen in coming up with an answer to the common flu, when it claims thousands of lives annually in the US alone. A pre-existing concern for Sri Lanka among all this is dengue, the island's age-old enemy. In the past years, the country has seen over 20,000 cases annually, with 31,163 cases last year. However, unbelievably, a drastic drop in dengue cases compared to the past years is seen this year. If it wasn't for COVID, this development would have been headline news. The question is it the diligence of the people keeping their environment free from mosquito habitats, or else?
We can't neglect it as this is low in this year because now it is raining. So with this monsoon and raining, there may be increase in near future. In 2-3 weeks time, cases will increase because we have experienced most of the dengue cases within the months of June, July and August couple of years. So that may happen this year again. We have another problem this year, COVID. All of our health staff, field staff and hospital staff engage with COVID vaccination and all the management work, and they are overburdened with that work. There are very little time they can spend on dengue control. If dengue comes this time, it will be very difficult to control it and very difficult to manage it.
In any case, COVID or not, Sri Lanka cannot afford to let its guard down on the dengue combat front. In addition to strict legal actions against those failing to keep their surroundings free of mosquito breeding habitats, several other measures are taken to eradicate the viral disease. One such move is introduction of the bacteria known as Wolbachia. When the bacteria is introduced to mosquitoes, It prevents the insects from being able to transmit the dengue virus to humans.
National Dengue Control Unit conducting two novel techniques to combat dengue in Sri Lanka. One is Wolbachia project. Here in Sri Lanka, we are conducting in two MOH areas, Colombo Municipal Council, District 1 MOH area and the Nugegoda MOH area. In Sri Lanka, we have already completed the release of mosquitoes to the environment. It's too early for us to tell good results, but we are expecting a result because with the experience we are having the other countries which have already completed this Wolbachia project, especially in Australia, and recently the randomized control trial done by Indonesia in the Yogyakarta area where they have seen 77% reduction of dengue patients. And the second project we are conducting with the medical faculty of Kelaniya University with the participation of molecular biology department. We are conducting the sterile insect technique. In this pilot project, we are releasing sterile males to the environment. This is done in the one identified Gamanildari division is Gampaha MOH area. Here also we have already completed the release of mosquitoes. Now they are monitoring the progress of the density of Aedes mosquitoes.
Even on the dengue front, there is conflict thought between local medicine and Western medicine. Some local remedies encourage the use of tender papaw leaves to replenish the platelet count in dengue patients, which tend to drop drastically during infection. The two schools of thought are at loggerheads here as well.
As a National Dengue Control Unit, we are not recommending using home remedies for the dengue patients. Same as all the clinicians who are treating the patients, especially the physicians and the pediatricians, never recommended those home remedies. What they advise, if you are having fever and if you are suspecting that this is dengue, please visit to a close by doctor or a hospital and get the medical advice, because if you are getting the home remedies, you might see that your fever goes down and even your platelet count remain normal. Certain individuals, when the fever is going down, the fluid within their blood vessels leaking from the blood vessels to the outside the cavity, especially we are telling to the abdominal cavity and the pleural cavity. So in that situation, the volume of the blood will be depleted and that will lead into conditions called shock. That is the critical phase in dengue.
However, even though a dengue patient is discharged from a hospital, it would be a while before they fully recover.
Once you discharge from the hospital, it depends from the individual patients, because there are certain individuals who are getting just a simple viral fever. When after discharge, if they feel all right, they can carry out their day-to-day activities. Having a few days of rest, they are normal activities. But there are certain individuals who can go into leaking phase, even to the shock. They may need little bit longer period of rest. When you are discharging from the hospital, the clinicians will recommend the number of days that you need to have a rest. So it may be 1 week, it may be 2 weeks.
COVID-19 may be hogging the global attention at present, but in Sri Lanka we can never turn our backs to the threat posed by dengue. Keeping the surrounding clean, free of mosquito breeding habitats is paramount. A little bit of diligence will go a long way in ensuring Sri Lanka doesn't have to contend with the surge in dengue cases at the heels of COVID-19.
A Sri Lankan delegation had held talks with US Congresswoman Dina Titus in Los Angeles. The talks had been on the present state of Sri Lanka and the LTTE propaganda in the post-war period, which attempt to convince the international community that war crimes were committed, especially during the last stages of the conflict. Sri Lanka had been represented, I should say, by the island's ambassador to the US, Ravinath Aryasinghe, via video link, and Sri Lanka's Consul General in Los Angeles, Dr. Lalit Chandradasa, at the discussion held on the 11th. The delegation had brought the pandemic situation, coupled with the floods in the island, to the US government's attention. What's more, an agreement has been reached to increase the number of AstraZeneca doses intended to be sent to Sri Lanka and for the consignment's expeditious dispatch. During the talk, Sri Lankan Ambassador Aryasinghe had explained that human rights were not violated in any way during and after the war, and that the humanitarian operations were conducted with maximum compassion, in contrast to what's stated in the House Resolution 413, which was tabled on the 18th of last month. Following the explanation, Congresswoman Titus had agreed to make her colleagues at the Congress aware about the situation. Only 10 members of the 430-strong Congress have so far inked the resolution.
ගෙදරකට තේ හදනවා කියන්නේ වෙනම වැඩක්. මැලිබන් තේ ගෙදර පදමට තේ.
Now, Justice Minister Ali Sabri says that there remains no doubt that the Protection and Indemnity Insurance Club will be able to cover even a claim exceeding $1 billion with regards to the Express Pearl disaster. He added that the Sri Lankan authorities are continuing with the drafting of larger damages claims in addition to the $40 million interim claim that has already been filed. Meanwhile, the Marine Environment Protection Authority revealed today that a staggering 1,000 metric tons of waste has been gathered up and stored during cleanup operations stretching over 200 kilometers of coastline.
The Express Pearl disaster currently counts as Sri Lanka's biggest environmental disaster to date. The damage to marine ecosystems stretch out over some 200 kilometers of coastline, stretching both north and south of the vessel's current location. Alarmingly, plastic nurdles, a microplastic raw material, continues to pile up as cleanup operations continue. According to Marine Environment Protection Authority Chairperson Darshini Lahandapura, it is a mammoth task that has been undertaken.
Marine Environment Protection Authority has removed nearly 1,000 metric tons of waste from beaches, then stored in a yard which has a license for hazardous waste storing. And disposal of this particular waste will be done according to the instructions or the guidelines given by the Central Environmental Authority. We are doing a cleanup process approximately of a stretch of 200 kilometers of beach daily, and this is an ongoing process.
Meanwhile, the remains of more dead marine animals continues to pile up on the country's beaches. With that, speaking to the media today on the issue, Justice Minister Ali Sabri said that the Sri Lankan authorities are working on their own assessments of damages led by the Attorney General, and that while a $40 million initial claim has already been filed, a larger claim is being drafted already.
What they are doing is their own assessment, their own evidence collection and all those things. We can't prevent them from doing that. They are obliged to do that. As far as we are concerned, we are not depending on that. That is why these committees are what we are doing. Honorable Attorney General is leading that. He is looking at the criminal aspect of it. He is looking at the civil aspect of it. We have already provided the interim first claim. The larger claim is going on. In order to identify those claims, only 5 subcommittees are put in. One of the subcommittees are in the process of now written and engage so many people all over the world. We have got a lot of offers on that. So we are in the process of finalizing those offers and identify those processes. You can rest assured we will do everything to get the best possible thing. At the end of the day, we need to look at the terms of reference of them. Their payments, their credibility, their past record, their conflict of interest. It's not a simple thing.
The Justice Minister also expressed confidence with the Protection and Indemnity Insurance Club's integrity when handling such claims, revealing that even claims exceeding $1 billion can be handled by them.
No, I think basically the PNIs are highly responsible organization, and they will also not do anything which will harm their reputation. And what the information reveals now, they have $1 billion kind of a limit of a claim. And then if it goes beyond that, all the PNIs together have a $7 billion limit. So I don't see the chances of they just going out, because they are not going to go out of business from this. In the meantime, we have taken all the precautions. The legal effort is led by the Honorable Attorney General. We are in the process of sourcing it from the overseas also whenever it's necessary. When it comes to assessing the damages and damage control, the UN experts are on the way. They will be here shortly.
Further responding to questions on why the Sri Lankan authorities have not acted to remove the wreckage to prevent an oil spill, he added that doing so would absolve the ship owner of the responsibility under salvage laws.
We must understand one thing. If we try to go and try to take over the salvage, we take the ownership of the ship. The moment that happens is the owners will get out of it. We understand what we do. That's why the experts are here. It's the owner's responsibility. He must go and get the salvo. He must go and get the wrecks. And we just cleared that last Saturday for them to go and do that.
In the meantime, the captain of the Express Pearl was released on bail today following his arrest and production before the Colombo High Court. The Russian national was released on a personal bond of 2 million rupees, while his overseas travel ban was extended as well.
People who were administered with the first dose of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine could well be in line to receive the Pfizer jab as their second dose. State Minister of Production, Supply and Regulation of Pharmaceuticals, Professor Channa Jayasumana, has made a request from the Advisory Committee on Communicable Diseases to provide necessary instructions on the possibility of such a move. It comes on the heels of a World Health Organization expert giving the thumbs up on the possibility of mixing the two jabs.
The island's daily COVID-19 caseload seems to be on the way down. After recording new daily cases in the range of 2,600 to 2,700 over the past days, the figure dropped even further yesterday to 2,361. Though it's a welcome change, it's anybody's guess whether the number would keep falling. 362 of the infections confirmed yesterday are from the Gampha district, which topped the list. What's more, no district was spared in terms of fresh cases yesterday. Meanwhile, Deputy Director General of Education and Research at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Hemantha Herath, today addressed claims that Sri Lanka's rate of COVID-19 infections is greater than that of neighbouring India, which has a population of 1.3 billion people.
Firstly, we had a very low level of infection or new cases reported a few months back, but the rapid increase of cases, probably beyond 3,000 a day, without any significant changes in the population, the indicators indicated that there has been a relatively high number of new cases reported compared to the total number of people living in Sri Lanka. In India also, the same thing was there. However, compared to the Sri Lanka, the Indian rate of reduction has now gone drastically low, so that the figures or the indicators are now much below or lower than Sri Lanka. But what I can say is our numbers have increased because of the unexpected high number of cases reported in the past few weeks. But these numbers are expected to go down in the coming week, and from there onward we will be able to see comparative figures if we can reduce the new cases emerging in the community or from the context in the coming days to a reasonable level.
In the meantime, Director General of Health Services Dr. Asala Gunawardana confirmed today that 67 COVID-related deaths had occurred on the 12th. He added that measures will be taken to ensure that daily deaths are included in the daily reports.
අපි අද දින සිට මරණ වාර්තා කරනු ලබන්නේ පසුගිය පැය 48 තුළ සිදුවෙන ඒ දිනේදී දිනයක් ඇතුළත සිදුවෙන මරණ සියල්ලම අපි වාර්තා කරන්න දැන් ක්‍රමවේදයක් සකස් කරලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට අපිට පැය 24ත් පැය 48ක් තුළ සිදුවෙන සියලුම මරණ අපි වාර්තා කරන්න කටයුතු කරනවා.
On developments from the country's vaccine front, 32,732 persons were administered with the second dose of the Sinopharm vaccine yesterday. The first dose of the vaccine was also administered to 26,187 persons yesterday. Meanwhile, 1,724 doses of Sputnik's second dose was also administered yesterday. In other developments, a discussion was held at the Temple Trees today under the patronage of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa regarding the possibility of reopening schools following the vaccination of teachers. At the discussion, Secretary to the Ministry of Education, Professor Kapila Pereira, said that if teachers are vaccinated and schools are to be reopened, students of grade 11 and 13 should be given priority for immunization. In the meantime, State Minister of Production, Supply and Regulation of Pharmaceuticals, Professor Channajai Sumana, today had made an official request to the Advisory Committee on Communicable Diseases to provide the necessary instructions on the possibility of administering the Pfizer vaccine as a second dose for persons who received the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. He had made this request following a remark made by the chair of the World Health Organization's Strategic Advisory Group on Experts of Immunization, Professor Alejandro Cravioto, who had confirmed the possibility of mixing and matching the vaccines. Meanwhile, the police continue to crack down on violators of quarantine laws, with vehicles entering Colombo also checked for the legitimacy to be on the roads during the travel restrictions. During the last 24-hour cycle, 1,198 persons were arrested by the police for various quarantine law violations. As for today, 2,259 fresh COVID-19 cases have been confirmed so far in the island, with 1,917 patients also being given the all-clear to leave their treatment centres. Sri Lanka's total recoveries jumped to 190,464. That puts the number of active cases in the country at 35,010.
In other local stories, the investigations into the controversial media briefing held by Azad Saleh, who is currently held by the Criminal Investigation Department under detention orders, have been completed. The Attorney General informed this to the Supreme Court when the case was taken up today. On the 16th of March, Saleh was arrested by the CID and was detained under the provisions of the Prevention of Terrorism Act. The arrest was made over several controversial remarks Saleh made at a media briefing with regard to the law of the country. We will see you shortly. Bear with us. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now to take a look at the Colombo Bourse. Sri Lankan shares snapped a 3-day winning streak to close lower today, hit by losses in industrial and financial firms. This year's all-share price index ended down 0.37% at 7,582.27. But despite the session's losses, the index is up 11.9% for the year. Meanwhile, the S&P SL20 index of more liquid stocks fell 11.43 points to close at 3,055.60. Now here's Dimantha Matthew with a brief report on today's market performance.
Today we had a bit of a negative impact to the market with yesterday's announcement of the fuel price hike. So with this fuel price hike will have a positive impact for the energy companies. However, it could give rise to inflation which could actually affect the other companies, especially in the consumer segment. So this is likely to have basically a negative impact for the overall demand for the companies, because on the cost wise we don't think that there is a major impact because furnace oil prices remain broadly unchanged. So today the index dipped by around 28 points, falling behind the 7,600 mark, and with that we saw a bit of selling pressure coming into the market.
The rupee, meanwhile, ended at 199.88 cents against the US dollar today after closing at 202.88 cents on Friday. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.